What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. Chapter 6. Let's try this again. The Doctrine of No Soul. Anatta. What is, in general, is suggested by soul, self, ego, or to use the Sanskrit expression, Atman, is that in man is a permanent, everlasting, and absolute entity, which is the unchanging substance behind the changing phenomenal world. According to some religions, each individual has a separate soul, which is created by God, and which finally, after death, lives eternally, either in heaven or hell, its destiny depending on the judgment of its creator. According to others, it goes through many lives until it is completely purified and becomes finally united with God or Brahman. Universal soul, or Atman, from which it originally emanated. The soul or self in man is the thinker of thoughts, feeler of sensations, and receiver of rewards and punishments for all its actions, good and bad. Such a conception is called the idea of self. Buddhism stands unique in the history of human thought in denying the existence of such a soul, self, or Atman. According to the teaching of the Buddha, the idea of self is an imaginary false belief which has no corresponding reality, and it produces harmful thoughts of me and mine, selfish desire, craving, attachment, hatred, ill will, conceit, pride, egotism, and other defilements, impurities, and problems. It is the source of all troubles in this world, from the personal conflicts to wars between nations. In short, to this false view can be traced all the evil in the world. One of the great things that we're seeing nowadays is this, I'm preemptively forgiven. It doesn't matter what I do or believe. As long as I have one belief, it doesn't matter. There's no change in who I am or what I'm going to be. It's why are you even trying to be righteous? I visited a state. I was unable to do videos Thursday. And in this state, most of the people who aren't Christian believe that it matters whether or not you're doing good or whatnot. But it's a majority Christian state where the vast majority of people do not believe that being a good person matters in the eyes of God or your afterlife or whatever. And two ideas are psychologically deep-rooted in man: self-protection and self-preservation. For self-protection, man has created God, on whom he depends for his own protection, safety, and security, just as the child depends on its parent. Now, certainly father and mother sort of projections upon God do fall into that category. For self-preservation, man has conceived the idea of an immortal soul or Atman, which will live eternally. In his ignorance, weakness, fear, and desire, man needs these two things to console himself. Hence, he clings to them deeply and fanatically. Again, the idea that I'm staying. You can't change the ultimate me. You can only change the body. Well, what you choose to do with your body and your mind obviously would change, what you are. The Buddhist idea does not support that ignorance, weakness, fear, and desire, but aims at making man enlightened by removing and destroying them. Striking at their very root, according to Buddhism, our ideas of God and soul are false and empty. Though highly developed as theories, they are all the same subtle mental projections garbed in an intricate metaphysical and philosophical phraseology. These ideas are so deep-rooted in man and so near and dear to him that he does not wish to hear, nor does he want to understand, any teaching against them. The Buddha knew this quite well. In fact, they said his teaching was against the current. Patta Sotagami, against man's selfish desires. Just 4 weeks after his enlightenment, seated under a banyan tree, he thought to himself, I've realized this truth, which is deep, difficult to see, difficult to understand, comprehensible only to the wise. Men who are overpowered by passions and surrounded by a mass of darkness cannot see this truth, which is against the current, which is lofty, deep, subtle, and hard to comprehend. We see ourselves as this three-horsed vehicle, but we're not this three-horsed vehicle. We're something else behind that. Well, I don't know anybody other than me that sees themselves as a three-horse vehicle. Well, I don't. I see myself as the spirit soul. But again, a changing thing, not this mind, not the sensations and the emotions and the thoughts. There's something else. With these thoughts in his mind, the Buddha hesitated for a moment whether it would not be in vain if he tried to explain to the world the truth that he had just realized. Then he compared the world to a lotus pond. In a lotus pond, there are some lotuses still under water. There are others which have risen only up to the water level. There are still others which stand above water and are untouched by it. In the same way, in this world, there are men at different levels of development. Some would understand the truth, so the Buddha decided to teach it. The doctrine of Anatta, or no soul, is the natural result or the corollary to the analysis of the five aggregates and the teaching of conditioned genesis. Paticca Samuppada. We have seen earlier in the discussion of the first noble truth, dukkha, that what we call a being or an individual is composed of the five aggregates, and that which are, when these are analyzed and examined, there is nothing behind them which can be taken as T. Oh, I. Okay. Okay, taken as T, I don't know. Taken as I, Atman or self, or any unchanging, abiding substance. That is the analytical method. The same result is arrived at through the doctrine of conditioned genesis, which is the synthetical method. And according to this, nothing of the world is absolute. Everything is conditioned, relative, and interdependent. This is the Buddhist theory of relativity. So being equiposed is not, well, I'm the same no matter what happens and no matter what I do and think I got to stay the same. That's not what's being talked about. Before we go to the question of anatta proper, it is useful to have a brief idea of the conditioned genesis. The principles of this doctrine is given in a short formula of 4 lines. When this is, that is. Amasmim sate idam hote. This arising, that arises. Amasupada idam upajjate. When this is not, that is not. Emasmim asate idam nahute. This seizing, that seizing. Emasa niroda. Idam nirujjate. On this principle of conditionality, relativity, and interdependence, the whole existence and continuity of life and its sensation is explained in a detailed formula which is called Paticca Samuppada, conditioned genesis, consisting of 12 factors. Through ignorance are conditioned volitional actions of karma formations. Avidya Pachaya Samkara. Through volitional actions is conditioned consciousness. Samkara Pachaya. Vinanam. Through consciousness are conditioned mental and physical phenomena. Vinana Pachaya Namarupam. Through physical and mental phenomena are conditioned the 6 faculties, i.e. the 5 sense organs and mind. Namaru Papachaya Hral Ayatam Nam. A cerebral L is kind of, you're not used to saying that. Through the 6 faculties is conditioned sensorial and mental contact. Salayatana Pachaya Tasso. Through sensorial and mental contact is conditioned sensation, passa, pachaya, vedanta. Through sensation is conditioned desire, thirst, vedanta, pachaya, tanha. Through desire, thirst is conditioned clinging, tanha, pachaya, upadanam. Okay, there's conditioned genesis. Is this, where's note 1? This seizing, that seizing. Emas neuroda idam. So it's basically when A is, B is, A arising, B arises. When A is not, B is not. A ceasing, B ceases. Okay. So 9. Through clinging is conditioned the process of becoming. Upadana paccaya bhavo. Through the process of becoming is conditioned birth. Bhava paccaya jata. Through birth are conditioned. 12. Decay, death, lamentation, pain, etc. Jata paccaya jaramaranam. This is how life arises, exists, and continues. If we take this formula in its reverse order, we come to the cessation of the process. Through the complete cessation of ignorance, volitional activities, our karma formations cease. Through the cessation of volitional activities, consciousness ceases. Through the cessation of birth, decay, death, sorrow, etc. cease. It should be clearly remembered that each of these factors is conditioned, paticca as well as conditioning, paticca samuppada. Therefore, they are all relative, interdependent, and interconnected, and nothing is absolute or independent. Hence, no first cause is accepted by Buddhism. As we have seen earlier, conditioned genesis should be considered as a circle, not as a chain. If you notice how some of the world cards, the Thoth Tarot in particular, you see that the end is the beginning. It's not ding, 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 and then it's over. The whole thing's going to recycle itself. The question of free will has occupied an important place in Western thought and philosophy, but according to conditional genesis, this question does not and cannot arise in Buddhist philosophy. If the whole existence is relative, conditioned, and interdependent, how can will alone be free? Will, like any other thought, is conditioned. So, called freedom itself is conditioned and relative. There can be nothing absolutely free, physical or mental, as everything is interdependent and relative. Free will implies a will independent of conditions, independent of cause and effect. How can will, or anything for that matter, arise without conditions, away from cause and effect, when the whole of existence is conditioned and relative, and is without the law of cause and effect? Here, again, the idea of free will is connected with the ideas of God, soul, justice, reward, and punishment. Not only is this so-called free will not free, but even the very idea of free will is not free from conditions. See, oh, I've got free will. It's like, well, yeah, as far as your actions to believe or disbelieve or do good or not, but you're put in limiting conditions. And actually, that's the secret to happiness. When you realize you're limited in that way, hey, there's things I can do. Yeah, you may have ideas of things that are the best to do for your being, but when you realize you're limited, that really cuts things off. And when you know what those limits are, you're not upset that hey, maybe it's possible that everybody watching my channel is someday going to be a millionaire, or whatever else they're looking for. But even that will be conditioned, in that there's been exceptions that I've actually encountered of people earning 5, 6, earning 7 digits a year, or at least 6 digits a year, and with millions of dollars or of assets to their name. But only most of those people that I've encountered that I knew that about, they were not happier than your lower class people. Most of them had higher stress and didn't seem to be as happy as individuals. They could buy themselves moments, I'm sure, but or find themselves moments based on their status or whatever. But yeah, it didn't seem to make the difference that some people would have thought that it would. according to the doctrine of conditioned genesis, as well as according to the analysis of being into 5 aggregates, the idea of an abiding immortal substance in man or outside, whether it is called Atman, I, soul, self, or ego, is considered only a false belief, a mental projection. This is the Buddhist doctrine of Anatta, no soul or no self. In order to avoid a confusion, it should be mentioned here that there are 2 kinds of truths: conventional truths, Samute Satya, Sanskrit, Samvrte Satya, and ultimate truth, Paramatta Satya, Sanskrit, Paramartha Satya. We could tell from this that Pali is not just a language that, you stick something in your mouth and if you so it's an easier way to say Sanskrit. That's not true. That example alone proves that it's not just making it easier to say. Because Satya is harder to say than Satya. Even for people in that culture, it's a physically more of a. Anyways, when we use such expressions in our daily life as I, you, being, individual, etc., we do not lie, because there is no self or being as such, but we speak a truth conforming to the convention of the world. But the ultimate truth is that there is no I or being in reality. As the Mahayana Sutra Lankaran says, a person, Pudgala, should be mentioned as existing only in designation prajnapate, i.e. conventionally there is a being, but not in reality or substance, dravya. The negation of an imperishable Atman is the common characteristic of all dogmatic systems, of lesser as well as the great vehicle, and there is therefore no reason to assume the Buddhist tradition, which is in complete agreement on this point, has deviated from the Buddha's original teachings. It is therefore curious that recently there should have been a vain attempt by a few scholars to smuggle the idea of self into the teaching of the Buddha, quite contrary to the spirit of Buddhism. These scholars respect, admire, and venerate the Buddha at his teaching. They look up to Buddhism, but they cannot imagine that the Buddha, whom they consider the most clear and profound thinker, could have denied the existence of an Atma or self, which they need so much. I don't see about it. Yeah, there's certainly a problem if it's like, if you need, it's, I want this aspect to exist because you need it and you're insecure and all that other stuff. And I don't really see it helping so much the idea that people have souls. They unconsciously seek the support of Buddha for this need for eternal existence. Of course, not in a petty self-individual self with a small s, but in the big self with a capital S. There's something that happens if you have a realization of the spiritual entity that is beyond this body and mind that you are operating. The mind being the consciousness structure. I guess maybe that even includes the aura field or something, because the light, heat, and magnetism that people foolishly try to moralize. But it's like it's like a non-self, but it's a self, and I guess that's my commentary was better the first run of this, but someone sabotaged this recording. It is better to say, frankly, that one believes in an Atman or self. One may even say that the Buddha was totally wrong in denying the existence of an Atman, but certainly it will not do for anyone to try to introduce into Buddhism an idea which the Buddha never accepted, as far as we can see from the original texts that are extant. But we got to remember that Buddhism isn't a historically Buddha. None of the Buddhas, you can say they were Buddha yogis, maybe even a messenger of Buddha yogi, but Buddhism is a conservative movement, much like the Council of Nicaea as compared to Jesus. Well, if you didn't find evidence of something as far as some stuff could have arisen around then, And it's like in the 370s, the Catholic liturgy and version of the Bible in Greek that the Orthodox look to. Well, there were certainly aspects of it that didn't exist before the 370s, and back in the 340s there was other stuff, and it's like, well, if it started at this point, let's say it started at this point, and then instantly you have 18 schools of thought in Buddhism. Not instantly, but pretty much right away, and only one survived. And so, is Buddhism psychology? Is it philosophy? What is it? Religions which believe in God and soul make no secret of these two ideas. On the contrary, they proclaim them constantly and repeatedly in the most eloquent terms. If the Buddha had accepted these two ideas, so importantly in all religions, he certainly would have declared them publicly, as he had spoken about other things, and would not have left them hidden to be discovered only 25 centuries after his death. Now, the idea of new things, but if you say that you'd have a text like this, historical text in terms of this is what the text was. It's not that it's been being changed every generation or something like this. The thing that we find is that, okay, don't talk about the religion that claims such a text, saying that this is what the religion teaches. That's what a reformist is. They're not like fundamentalists. They're not going to the claims of revelation and inspiration themselves. Maybe they are, but they're not saying, okay, let's directly make conclusions about this. That's what a fundamentalist is. They looked at the original text and make conclusions. It's like fundamentalist Christians, the Sabbath starts at Friday at sunset and ends at sundown on Saturday. Christmas and Easter aren't holidays. There are other holidays that are celebrated. Various things that are will be signs when you encounter a fundamentalist Christian, because they're following stuff directly in the Bible and maybe even not following what has been said before. But most Protestants will follow the Catholic traditions as far as the week and the holidays and various other things that proves that they're not conservative. And so you don't have to support yourself in some previous conclusion, even if there's a whole group of conclusions that are a little bit different than yours, especially if they don't say they're wrong. If you're going and you're finding this, you can definitely say that something is part of a path if you can tie it to the original text, even if you don't find anybody else saying something about it, But if it's different, if it's outside of that, by outside of that, I mean, here are some principles, and it's not according to any of these principles, and yet you're claiming that it's part of the thing. A lot of times, it's okay to do new things and following such principles, but saying they're starting required things on people. Oh, take the greater promise. And what greater promise? What are you talking about? People became nervous at the idea through the Buddha's teachings of the Anatta. The self they imagined they have is going to be destroyed. The Buddha was not unaware of this. A bhikkhu once asked him, "Sir, is there a case when one is tormented when something is permanent within oneself is found?" "Yes, bhikkhu, there is," answered the Buddha. "A man has the following view. The universe is that Atman. I shall be after death, permanent, abiding, everlasting, unchanging, and I shall exist as such for eternity. He hears the Tathagata, or disciple of his, preaching the doctrine of aiming at the complete destruction of all speculative views, aiming at the extinction of thirst, aiming at detachment, cessation, nirvana. Then that man thinks, I will be annihilated, I will be destroyed, I will be no more. So he mourns and worries himself, laments, weeps, beating his breast, and becomes bewildered. Thus, O bhikkhu, there is a case where one is tormented when something permanent within oneself is not found. Elsewhere, the Buddha says, O bhikkhus, the idea I may not have is frightening to the uninstructed worldling. Those who want to find a self in Buddhism argue as follows. It is true that the Buddha analyzes being into matter, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, and says that none of these things is self, but he does not say that there is no self at all in man or anywhere else apart from these aggregates. And there's a couple of reasons for those positions, but I guess we'll do the second part at another time. And, you know, I have physical, emotional, causal, intellectual, etheric, so a whole string of the mind and the soul plane and the soul planes and what you could call the spirit plane and the ocean. You're operating all these. So when we talk about dividing these things into things, okay, maybe the body and the mind and stuff are vehicles, but it does help at times to look at things in different levels.